Hello, Five Finance family. Welcome to Flip It with Samara, the power of tax planning. And so, on tonight, I'm super excited because we have a special guest that is going to be walking us through a little something called the FIRE movement, right? But before we get into that, let me tell you what the show is all about. So, I am your host, Samara Andrews. I'm the CEO and the founder of Five Finance, a virtual based accounting firm located in the greater Atlanta, Georgia area. And here on Flip It, we are all about educating you, right? So we want you to be engaged throughout the live. We want you to ask your questions. We welcome your comments. We have created a safe space so you can do just that. We encourage it, in fact, right? So on tonight, we're going to be sharing a lot of information with you, but we want to make sure that you're rocking with us throughout the live. So if you are in the live right now, drop some emojis in the comments below. Let's get some dollars. Hey, five fam. Angelica's rocking with us. Hello, Angelica. J Tay is on. Javon. Oh, Javon. Hello, Javon. I get super excited when the Five Finance family joins because I know that y'all rock with me throughout the week when we jump on calls and whatnot. But I'm so glad that you donated your time to log on tonight. And so, again, we've created this safe space so that you can ask questions and we can educate you on the power of tax planning. Remember, our motto is that the wealthy don't start tax planning once they become wealthy, but rather they use tax planning as a tool to continue to grow their wealth. So we tell you over and over every week that tax planning is for everyone. Yes, it's for you. You can start tax planning no matter where you are on your financial journey. And we encourage you to do so, and we definitely equip you with the tools to do so. So we'll be sharing some information later on throughout the live so that you connect with us if you want to go in depth and develop a tailored plan just for you, right? So again, this month has been all about assets, and we've been talking with special guests week over week along the lines of asset planning in some way, shape, or form. And on tonight, I have had the privilege of meeting this guest in a Facebook group that we both are part of. And TJ, when I say awesome, amazing, definitely on track of retiring at the age before the age of 40. And so Z is going to share with us how we can do that. So I'm intrigued. Hopefully you have invited others because apparently you were intrigued to see how you can do that as well. So I'm going to be taking my notes. So don't be surprised if when we flip back to me, like I'm like typing and writing stuff in, because I'm definitely going to be taking a lot of notes tonight. So before we get any further, I want to bring TJ on stage. TJ, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
TJ, just please introduce yourself to the Five Finance family, and then we're going to jump right into it.
Sure. So I'm TJ Wey. My pronouns are Z and Zer, and I am on track to retire by 40. I used to be an IT project manager. I did that for over 10 years, and I'm still doing some corporate consulting, but now I'm running my own business as a money habits coach for small business owners who want to escape the hustle culture and build a life of abundance. And we do that through better money habits, financial foundations, and talking about cash flow, the often forgotten aspect of making your business profitable.
I love that. I love that you're all about attacking the habits first because when I sit down with a client, it's all about a mindset. Like you first have to change the mindset of a person. And I had a guest on that talked about the money mindset shift, I believe it was.
Mhm.
Anyways, she did an amazing job with walking us through like how our money stories are created and then how
Yes.
we can change those money stories. So it sounds like we're in for a treat because it sounds like you're going to be talking about something along the same lines. So definitely thank you for being a guest on tonight. So I want to get right into it. We're going to get to the fire movement, but I definitely want to start with the profits of a business, or I should say the cash flow. So
Mhm.
you mentioned that that's important. I want you to walk us through as a small business owner. I'm just starting out. I understand what my profits are. I understand what my income is, what my expenses are, but maybe I'm not effectively creating a positive cash flow. So how do I do that?
Yeah. So usually when we talk about having more profit in the business, when I ask people how they plan to go about doing that, their answer is typically in raising revenue, which might look like increasing their prices, adding value to their customers, getting more customers, doing more marketing. So that is often like the main focus of like, I'm going to get more profit means I'm going to sell more or get more money coming in the door. But what doesn't typically get addressed is the back end part where it's like, okay, you got the money, but most of us are on here because we have some kind of money habit that wasn't serving us and we want to figure out what that is. And we carry that into our businesses. So if you have some kind of money habit, starting a business is not going to suddenly solve all of your money problems, because we typically, like when we get coaches to help us start a business, we talk about the sales, how to get a sale, and those are very important because you're only actually in business once you make a sale. But we forget about the part where we're spending the money before we get more money. We typically end up saying, okay, I'm building my business, I need some ads in order to sell more. But if you needed the money to sell more and you want to pay yourself and you want to be able to hire a virtual assistant or you want to invest in a new website, suddenly you've racked up a lot of expenses that outrun your revenue. And that's where you start shrinking your profits, because most people don't intentionally say, oh, this is how much profit I'm going to set aside, or this is how much I need in order to run the business from like at a minimum perspective. And they start outpacing themselves because they see the cash in their business bank account and go, well, I can afford that. And suddenly it's all gone.
Mm. Okay, so you're getting a lot of comments because we actually have someone in the comment section. I'm gonna put her on Front Street. So Angelica is an income strategist for beautypreneurs, and she is definitely on the same page as you. She says the same thing, right? Putting those profits first, so to speak. But
Mhm.
making sure that that is a focus, that we're looking at profit margins. And I love when you say that we need to get out of the habit of looking at the account and saying, oh, I have it, I can afford it. That must mean I can afford it. Instead of looking at it from a different lens of, hey, okay, yeah, I have that now, but in order for me to continue to have this, then I need to continue to do what I'm doing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Not adding more to the pot. And I love the approach of your expenses outrunning your revenue, because that is usually what happens to us. We overextend ourselves.
Mhm.
And I think it's because of the mindset. Maybe we're not thinking out of an abundance mindset. Angelica, I borrowed this from you, but more out of a scarcity mindset.
Yes.
So we definitely have to change that as entrepreneurs. So thank you for breaking that down. So like when you meet an entrepreneur who is in that rut, like what is your advice to them on how to get it out of that rut?
So the first step, if I'm working with them, is to tell them to actually take an inventory of their fixed expenses. What I mean by that is any like annual subscriptions, monthly subscriptions. If you're an online business, you have a Zoom subscription or a scheduling tool that you love to use, or you have Canva. And those are all money that you've already committed to spend and might make your business fall apart if suddenly you didn't have cash to support that subscription, right? So those are all things that you actually have to take account of. And if you don't have that number visible for you of like what your minimum balance needs to be in order to keep those things running in your business, you're going to get yourself in a place where half your business doesn't work anymore because you couldn't afford whatever tool it was because you decided to spend it on like a new coach or something. So, step one, even in personal finance, know what it is you're spending. And I mean actual dollars, like go through your bank statements and take actuals. None of like, don't just estimate them, round numbers, none of that. Those are all imaginary. It won't do you any good.
Speaking my language, Five Finance Family, don't I always say manage your money? In order for you to manage that money, you have to know exactly what you are spending. And I'm talking about every single dollar to the T. You got to tell your money what you want it to do. So yeah, the first plan of attack is understanding where you are. You don't know where you can go unless you understand where you are. So I love that approach. All right, step one. And then step two.
Step two is to build a plan for what you want to do with the money coming in. So you know what you need as a minimum to run the business. And I also suggest, depending on where the business owner is, because typically people come to me, they're either starving their business or they're starving themselves. So they
Right.
may not be paying themselves out of the business and they may be fortunate that they don't have to. But one thing I want to interject here is that typically when you're working hard on something and you're going gangbusters with it and it's going really well, even if you don't have to pay yourself, eventually you're going to start resenting your business because you are putting a lot of effort and you're like visibly successful on the outside. But if you're not rewarding yourself from the business in ratio to that success, you're
Hmm.
going to eventually be like, why am I doing this? So
Mm,
just
let's just
have
put
to
a pin
insert
in
that.
that. Let's put a pin in that because I was over here like y'all couldn't see. I was like, oh, she is preaching. So listen, when you as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, had the thought of, oh, I want to have my own business, it wasn't so that you can be a slave to that business. You didn't trade being an employee for somebody else just to be a slave to your business. You had it with the mindset of saying, hey, I want to create this wealth for my business, for myself, and I also want to pursue a passion while doing it, right? I'm passionate about this particular thing, and I can use this passion that I have in order to generate wealth. So, personally, TJ, what I tell people is you should pay yourself first. If your business can't afford you, then maybe you should consider another business, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I did. That's what I used as an exit strategy. So I grew my business while I was still working my 9 to 5. And once I saw that the business could consistently support all of my needs and pay me, the salary that I
Mhm.
was accustomed to receiving, then I was like, okay, the business is stable enough to do this. I understand my bottom line, right? Y'all
Mhm.
have to know your numbers. This is why I tell you, as entrepreneurs, that you have to know your books. So either you know your numbers and you put on that accountant hat, or you get the professional who's going to walk you through and go line by line and make you understand what those financials are, because you cannot make decisions as an entrepreneur unless you know your bottom line. You can't. It's going to be impossible. And if you do make decisions, I can guarantee you they're going to be bad ones because you just don't know the bottom line. You don't know what you can afford, or you don't know what you cannot afford. So
Mhm.
that's the approach that I took. I had to build the business up to a point where I said, okay, it can sustain me, it can sustain
Right.
my lifestyle. So that was step two. Step three.
So once you have a plan for how much you want to spend in a certain area, so it might be a budget or it might just be a ranking system of, hey, I absolutely have to pay myself first. And for me and my clients, I also don't let them get away with not having a retirement fund. So it's pay yourself your whatever your regular salary is, and then there's the retirement fund. And then we've got taxes and all sorts of other things depending on how your business is set up. So that might be payroll, it might be one-time expenses, things like that. But like at the minimum, even if you don't have a detailed budget, you need to know where you're ranking those priorities of I absolutely need to pay this bill first. And maybe that bill is you. But until you have those priorities set, you don't have a way of saying, hey, there's this cool new thing. So actually, I met somebody who makes avatars for business owners. So like they're cartoon versions of them that are meant to be like inserted into your media, and they're really cute, adorable, and she has them so they're work in Canva and all of these things. And that's a set dollar amount to invest. And I have to sit there and go, is this more important than paying my VA? Or is this more important than paying myself this month? Whatever that is. If it's not, then I go, okay, it's going to have to wait until the cash is actually there.
Right. Absolutely. And I totally agree with that. And that the only way you can make those informed decisions is if you know where you are. So I love this. She gave us, or Z gave us, some really, really cool, actionable items, quick things for us to do as business owners before we make those decisions that can cause us to not have a positive cash flow. So definitely hope that you were taking notes and writing those down, because those were three quick action items that you can do before making a decision. Before we go forward, TJ, we do have a question, and I want to make sure we address it in the live. So Samurai is asking, as a small business, should you have a monthly budget as well as an annual budget? I'll let you answer that, TJ.
So budgets are an interesting concept for me because again, I like to go back to what did you actually spend? So if you don't have data of what you've spent in the past month or year, then for the most part your budget is hypothetical. It's what you think you might spend,
Correct.
and that's great for keeping track of like how well you forecasted for yourself. But I want to make sure people know that it's not meant to be restrictive. That's just your guideline and your projection.
Correct.
Once you do have your past expenses, I highly recommend you build your future budgets based off of that, especially year over year, like comparing August to August,
Correct.
because those will be reflective of whatever seasonality shows up in your business. And I highly recommend not necessarily a monthly budget, but the annual budget is nice for tax planning purposes and figuring out how
Mhm.
much you're going to be able to pay yourself that year and all of those things.
Correct.
But humans are not designed to think about things in year long durations. Our human brain is actually limited to 3 months. And then if you have ADHD, it's shorter, it's closer to like 2 weeks.
Right.
So at the longest you can really truly plan for your business is 3 months. And then I don't personally necessarily do monthly other than the fact that that's where like statements get cut or it's really easy to close your books for the month. From a budget perspective though, I usually go, what's the next big event? Like what's the next big investment I
Mm.
need to make? I've got a podcast rolling out in 2 weeks. Whatever those are, I need to go, okay, up until that point, what needs to happen, what investments need to happen in order to make sure that goes smoothly. And hypothetically, that launch and that event will get more money in the door and allow me to then go back to my wish list of things that I want to invest in and reassess for the future.
Right. And I love that you broke down, like, okay, so TJ used a lot of accounting finance terms. So I'm just going to break it down for the Five Finance family. So she mentioned forecasting, right? So, what is forecasting? So, that is when you're taking the budget that you have created, and as the year progresses, you replace some of those numbers with actuals because you've seen how it actually happened, right? And it may adjust your numbers throughout the year. So they may go up or they may go down depending on how you are trending throughout the year. That's a very quick, dirty view of forecasting, right? But I just wanted to, because y'all are probably like, well, what the heck is forecasting? But that's what it is. It's just adjusting the budget. So you have your budget number, you have your end goal. It's a goal, it's a baseline. But as the year progresses, you also have actuals that you can plug in that number and you can say, ooh, am I close to my goal? Am I over my goal? Am I under my goal? So I have to make adjustments accordingly in order to stay on track with that goal that I have, right? So I love that concept. Yes, a budget, right, is just a hypothetical number. I love that you said it's not meant to be restrictive, right? Because when you, I hate to say this, I'm probably going to get some flack, but oh well, who cares? All right, so when you talk about the financial peace movement, right? If you ever took that class, you probably left it feeling restricted. Like you, oh my gosh, these are all the things I can't do. So I tell people when you manage your money, it's actually you saying, these are all the things I can do with my money. This is what I can do. Like I want you to feel empowered. I don't want you to feel restricted. So I'm glad you take that same approach with your clients, TJ, because I feel like as individuals, we need that gratification, and some of us need instant gratification. And so, if we're not feeling rewarded or invested in
Yeah.
something, we don't want to do it anymore. We're like, well,
Mhm.
I'm good. It's not working for me. I don't feel rewarded. I don't feel like this is fun anymore. I don't want to do it. So, I'm glad that you take the approach that it's not plan is not used as a restrictive tool, but more so as, hey, a tool of, hey, these are all the things that I can do. Here's what I can afford, and here's the smart way of approaching it. So thank you for breaking that down for us.
You're
I
welcome.
really appreciate that. That was amazing. All right, so now that we understand, everything that we need to do to have this positive cash flow, I want to move on and talk about generational wealth because we talked about it a little bit when you say that you require also that your clients have retirement planning, right?
Yes.
I think a part of building generational wealth is putting money aside for the latter, right? In addition to other things. So, walk us through what you talk about with your clients when you get on the terms of generational wealth. Like, how do you approach that?
So I like to explain that generational wealth isn't always about the kids, and it
Right.
may also not always be about your parents or other older relatives. It's like a full circle event in your family where the fact that my parents are retired now and they usually don't talk to me about like what their bank balances are or their net worth, but I happened to be home one time and they were talking about their stock portfolio and my mom had her account open and I saw she has more than enough. Like the fact that like I was growing up, she was like, "You're my retirement plan. We're going to invest in your education. We're going to help you pay for college so that when you get a good job and we retire, you'll be able to fund us." So that's what I grew up with, was this expectation that my contribution to generational wealth was that in my 30s and 40s and 50s, I would be part of the sandwich generation that gets to support my parents, as well as, I don't have kids now, but hypothetical kids, and be part of like that was going to be part of my lifestyle. And I built kind of like this subconscious concept of like this pressure of I'm going to have a stable income in order to support more than myself.
Mm,
And the fact that I see now that my parents made it on their own and I absolutely do not have to worry about them. My brother still lives with them. They support my grandmother, but they're all taken care of just based off of what they did for themselves is such a relief for me. I don't have to think about it anymore. It's lighter mental burden. And that's what I like to talk about with all of my clients is a lot of these financial decisions, there's so much advice about what you should or shouldn't do, what your priorities should be. But the final answer is if it lightens the mental burden for you, that is the direction you need to go because
mm,
we don't need to be sitting here doing one of my clients described it as emotional cutting, where they like go to look at their money and like hurt themselves with it and try to punish themselves by looking at how bad their situation is. That's not what we want for you. We want you to have a healthy relationship with your money.
right.
So we do things to lighten the mental burden, to remove those things that are making you feel like crap about your money, and support any habits that you already have in a way that is healthy and allows you to be you and have that freedom without like putting that extra pressure. So when I talk about generational wealth, I talk about the concept of like we like to think of things as linear. Like usually you have kids and you're like, "Oh, I should start saving for their college." If that's the way you want to go in terms of supporting them. And there's advice usually of like you do your kids first and then you forget to do your own retirement. My parents retired at the same time that I graduated college. So like those things needed to happen
Mm-hmm.
in parallel. So when I talk about generational wealth, want people to realize that they are part of that chain, that taking care of themselves is a
Mm,
big part of how you ensure generational wealth for your whole family.
I love it. Because we do, I think when the concept is thrown out there, the first thought is putting money aside for someone else, not necessarily money that you're going to be able to enjoy, right? And it's like, I'm doing all of this work for somebody else, right? And so, again, that doesn't work for some people. I know for me personally, I've always had the approach of, I want to retire while I still have full function of my limbs and all of my faculties upstairs. I don't want to
Yes.
retire when I'm like in a nursing home and withering away. You know what I mean? Like I want to enjoy myself now. And so, with that in mind, I love the approach that you're taking, saying, hey, you need to consider all of it as a whole and make sure that you're making healthy decisions. I love that you stay there because, again, the habits that we have may be unhealthy. And so we need to make decisions at this point that if we want to create this generational wealth, we have to do what's healthy for us first. And then we can take care of the next person. It's like when you're on
Mhm.
the airplane, right? And
Yes.
they say, hey, in the event that the airplane is going down, put the mask on you first, then help your neighbor. So you have to
Yes.
make sure that you're helping yourself first before you can help somebody else. So we have to make sure that we are healthy first before we can focus on the next generation. And I love this approach because there's nothing wrong with that. And we shouldn't feel bad about it either, finance family. Don't feel bad about putting money aside for you, right? Because when you do that, you can effectively save for your children. I have real children, so not hypothetical children. right? So I'm saving for me, but I'm also saving for my kids as well. And it's all a part of me creating my generational wealth, building this legacy that's not going to stop with me. And it hopefully doesn't end with them either. Hopefully, it's something they can continue to pass on to their children. So I love that you had kind of that insight with your family. I think what we need, and I can't speak for your household, but I know in my household, I wish we had more open conversations
Yes.
around, retirement planning, and around generational wealth and the
Mhm.
gap that exists. I just wish we had conversations about that and how we could reduce that gap, right? And those are
Yeah.
the conversations that I have with my kids. I'm very open, very transparent with them because I want them to understand. I truly believe that education is the first step. So I
Mhm.
need them to first understand where you are and then the things that you can do to get where you want to be. And the younger you start, I tell this to everybody that I know. Oh my gosh, time
Yes.
is so
It's
valuable.
so big.
Just
It's enormous because we all actually go through the same journey of like
right,
you give your kids an allowance. They've got to figure out for themselves what their like savings habit is
right.
of are they a saver? Are they a spender? I always think of this in terms of Halloween candy. I have an older brother. He was the saver of Halloween candy and I was the one that would like eat it all right away. But I got to see like the difference of like, oh, later in the year he still had candy he could eat. And I was like, even that was enough for me to be like, oh, this is like parallel to my money story of am I going to be a spender when I have money or am I going to know that there is a future that I have to plan for? So the sooner you start your kids on it, they can learn those lessons for themselves because some of those do need to be personal lessons.
Right.
But I do want to touch on the concept when and like tying in generational wealth and the concept of assets right now. I like my parents helped me with college, but I actually got mostly a full ride scholarship.
Mm,
So what happened for me generational wealth wise was actually in the knowledge they gave me. My family
mm,
talked about money, not necessarily on purpose to educate me, but
mm-hmm,
there were always conversations around the dinner table. We'd go out to restaurants, and my dad would be like, what credit card should I be using for restaurant points? And my mom was the one who knew how to do it. And having like seeing those instances told me,
mm-hmm,
oh, this is what money looks like. This is how you think about money. Here's how you maximize credit card points. My mom cut coupons all the time. All of these things,
mm-hmm.
those are all lessons that I got to learn by watching how my parents modeled handling money. And that's what got me to where I am today. They didn't hand me a lump sum of cash, but they
Right.
continually talked about money in front of me.
Right. Oh, absolutely. And even with us not necessarily having a conversation, but introducing kids to the concept of uh, interest at an early
Yeah.
age, right? Like my brother has a really cool story that his friend told him of how his dad introduced him to the concept of interest. So his dad loaned him money. Okay, and he said, I'm going to loan you this money for you to buy X, Y, and Z. And then at the end of 2 years, you need to pay me back that money, but you need to add interest to it. And he was like, what? You only loaned me 6,000. Why am I paying you back $7,500? That doesn't make sense. He was like, well, this is how the world works. This is what the banks do, right? So I
Mhm.
am trying to teach you a concept now that you're going to utilize in the real world. And so, because that child was introduced to that concept at such an early age, guess what? That shaped his whole view on how he is
Yes.
to manage his money. He understood that, hey, if I borrow something, I can't necessarily repay that same amount back. It may cost me more to borrow it.
Mhm.
So then I have to make sure that one, if I'm borrowing something, like it's really to help me obtain more assets,
Yes.
right? And it's
Mhm.
not just something that I'm just borrowing to like credit card debt, right? You're not running up
Yeah.
credit card debt. But then it also gave him the concept of learning how interest can work in his favor, right? So if he invests that same money, it also earns interest and it earns
Mhm.
something called compound interest. So I loved the story because it not only just had that conversation with that child, but it showed him through action, right? Like this is how it works in the real world. So I wanted you to be informed and prepared. And I do with my kids, like we had a chores list And because I wanted to teach my kids the concept of earning your keep. I feel like, you got to,
There's a trade off there. Yeah.
right? You got to earn your keep. And so we had this list where, you got paid according to the chores that you did. You didn't just get this allowance. And so if you didn't check it off, guess what? You didn't get paid. I was like, just like you going to work, if you don't clock in, you don't get paid.
Yep. That actually backfired on my mom.
It didn't work
Because
for
what it
you?
was, she gave us 50 cents a day to do
Oh,
like random chores. It wasn't like a set list that we had to do in a
right.
certain period of time. And then her method was that if we chose to opt out of the chore, she refusal to do it.
Oh,
So we eventually just like, no, it's not worth 10 cents, whatever.
yeah, no, no. My stakes were a little higher, TJ. So it definitely worked, and it definitely created a work ethic that I wanted my kids to have. And that's just one way that you can introduce your child or introduce the next generation to different concepts around money. Right. So definitely have to find out what works for that child. I will say this though, as far as the Halloween candy thing, like I was not your brother. I was definitely you because I was like, this candy's not going to be good in 3 months. Let me just eat it all. Um,
Oh,
and
that's another thing though. I don't think in my household we actually care about expiration dates, so that wasn't a problem.
so that wasn't even a problem. Yeah, no. But yeah, so definitely know that our actions, what we're exposed to, it definitely shapes how we view money as we grow older into adulthood. I think we had a comment or a question, so I want to make sure that I
Yep.
address it before we go further because we are almost about to wrap this up. It was such a great conversation.
Oh man, time flies.
I know. So Samara says, TJ, in the scheme of finances, how important should saving for our future slash retirement rank?
So the concept of like saving for the future is really interesting in terms of the psychology of it because you can't actually imagine your future self. You're like we're raised in this era of instant gratification. So I actually heard another financial independence person say they named their retired self a different name. So their name for their retired self is Wanda, which was not her actual name. And she considers them a separate person by giving them that name. And it helps a lot because we're trained in our society to sacrifice for other people. So if we give our future selves a different name, I just refer to myself as future TJ, then you're more likely to prioritize their needs, not necessarily above your own, because we definitely want to make sure you make it to retirement, but at least you're using society's programming in your favor by considering your future self to be a separate person. And when we talk about how important it is to save for the future, we have to go to the concept of the compounding interest or time in the market if you're using stocks as your investment vehicle. And even in real estate, like the longer you hold on to a house, you probably bought it at a certain price, the land doesn't lose any value, you get all the tax benefits, the value of your house goes up, all of these things. The longer you have it, the more valuable it becomes. And I read something recently, somebody did the hypothetical calculation of if you invested, I want to say it was, don't quote me on this, it was like $6,000 the day your child is born. By the time they're 60, they will have $1 million.
Correct.
So even if you say start now and you maybe spend the rest of this year focusing on setting up your retirement fund and loading that up with every extra dime you have that you can afford, and then don't add to it for the next 5 years because you want to prioritize other things, at least that original amount is benefiting from the longer term compound interest of being in the market for longer.
Correct. I totally agree. All right, so I want to touch on this last part because absolutely everybody's intrigued. I'm intrigued. The fire movement, right?
Yeah.
So I know that it stands for something. I want you to walk us through what it stands for. And then I want you, if you can, give us 3 simple steps on how we can start our path to retiring early.
Okay. So financial independence retire early. That's what it stands for. So we usually either just refer to it as FIRE or we might hear it as FI because not all of us want to retire early. The tagline of me retiring by 40 is more of like that's the stakes of like I have enough money that if I wanted to follow like the traditional, like when you retire, you stop working entirely, I could make that happen at the age of 40. But that's not necessarily what most of us do in the FIRE movement. It's more this concept of we've optimized our finances to the maximum that our lifestyles will allow. So for me, I am more on, we call it the fat FI side, where you want to retire and you want to have a like an abundant retirement. And there are other people who just want to go live on a farm and homestead and like not talk to anybody. And that could be more of a lean fi lifestyle where they don't have to have a lot of fixed expenses. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of variation in what being financially independent means.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, it means taking advantage of the financial systems that we live with. So optimizing tax sheltered accounts, using your retirement fund that your employer sponsors, like getting the match at least from them, and investing in real estate, being in stocks, whatever it is. Like it doesn't have to be like all of them, but it's about maximizing it to the point where you're getting yourself farther ahead than if you just did nothing. If you were a typical drone as an employee and you're like, oh, I'll just keep working for 40 years. Like that's not the lifestyle we want. And we want to be able to ensure that when we do decide to take a break, some of us will do like mini retirement. So I would argue that I might be somewhere in a mini retirement phase right now, that I can still have the lifestyle that I desire. Because typically the traditional retirement advice is that you save up a certain amount and you assume that you're not going to make any money after you retire, and you're actually going to downsize when you retire, potentially because you're now an empty nester and all of these things. But though that like advice is typically on the concept that when you retire you're going to make less than you made while you were working full time, and that doesn't necessarily fit everybody's idea of what a retirement should be. Of like, if right now you live off of 80K a year and then your retirement fund only supports 40K a year, is that really going to support the lifestyle that you want to have when you're retired?
Right, right. I agree. So, like, usually the first approach that you, excuse me, that you have to reconcile with is what is it going to cost my future self, right? So
Yes.
I'm gonna name myself Michelle because I do have like a this alter ego on Facebook. So, anyways, so my name is Samara, but I go by Michelle on Facebook. So, what does Michelle need in order to live the life that she wants to live, right? And not have to work. So that's the first number that I came up with. And
Hmm.
my lifestyle is going to look drastically different from what it is now. And that's another thing that I think we forget is like, what is that lifestyle going to look like too? Because you may not want to have a house, you know, when you start
Yeah.
like you may say I don't need a house, I can downsize. Me and my husband say, hey, we're probably going to sell our house and we're going to get an RV and we're going to travel the country, and we don't need
Yes.
much for that. So
Right.
with that being said, there's different approaches like you're saying to your retiring early. It just depends on what type of lifestyle you've envisioned for yourself. So yeah, Michelle has a plan and Michelle is going to execute that plan.
Yes, I love it. Yeah. So that's step one, right? Is knowing how
Yep.
much needs to have the
Right.
lifestyle that you're envisioning.
Right.
And based off of that number, you have a goal now. You can
Right.
say, okay, I'm going to reach that by hitting that entirely in my retirement funds, which you have to then take into account the fact that there are withdrawal minimums after a certain age,
Right.
or you can't access that cash until a certain age because, or you'll end up incurring a tax
Penalties. Right.
penalty or
Correct.
penalties for pulling it out. And you have to start thinking, okay, well, if like for me, if I'm retiring at 40, I can't touch any of the money in my retirement accounts until I'm 59 and a half at the earliest for my 401k.
Right.
So I have to have a plan for where I'm going to get cash for those 20 years in between. So that means I can't just depend on my traditional tax sheltered retirement accounts. I have to have investments that are actually tax impacted that will support that intervening 20 years. So you have to think about, okay, if I wanted to retire early, and when you say retire early, like my parents technically retired early. They retired like 5 years early based
Mm-hmm.
off of like Social Security's definition of your retirement age. So I
Right.
want to point out that that's a made up number, guys. Like when you're supposed to retire is something that some economics professor decided was the correct number to make sure that Social Security would be sustainable for a
Right.
certain amount of time. So that doesn't have to be your guideline. It's really about retiring before you burn yourself out, like Samara said, of like
Right.
being functional and having all of your mental facilities and all of these
Right.
things.
Right.
And like knowing what that means to you, and this is again like I'm going to go back to like your personal habits and your business habits are typically the same. You got to know what your priorities are and build a plan around it. So we
Right.
start with knowing what you need, and then you got to figure out what your plan is to meet that need, and in order to support that plan, what your priorities are and what you're willing to do or not willing to do to get there.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, once you have that goal, you definitely, it should be that much easier to create a strategy to achieve that goal. And again, you're going to have to make some decisions on what's important and what that lifestyle is going to look like. But you could definitely do it. And concerning the retirement accounts, TJ, there are actually some accounts that you can use and you can make those withdrawals and it'll just be like income, but me and you can chat offline. Um, but it's definitely a strategy that I use. So I may not have like just a 401k or just the IRA or just the Roth, right? Or just stock investments. It's all about having diversification in your portfolio so that wherever you are in your stage of retirement, you'll have income that is going to support you throughout every stage. So, awesome point. All right. So, last point.
So the last point is knowing that it doesn't have to look like everybody else's,
Love it.
right? That if you start looking into the fire movement, you're going to get inundated with stories of how people did it by a certain age or through a certain method. And those are all great blueprints. And I definitely recommend borrowing whatever you think is cool or fun or will really fit the lifestyle that you're looking for. But they don't all have to look the same because this is about prioritizing you, about making sure that you're happy and that you're enjoying your life. And the whole concept of the fire movement is not necessarily to hit a particular goal, because there is a certain point where the movement can get kind of like achievement oriented and ladder climbing kind of feeling and become a competition. But the original principle behind this is the concept of you only have the one life and you only have so much health before you start deteriorating and you need like support being who you are, or to you end up with the long-term illnesses, that you have to enjoy every moment that you have.
Mm,
And if working for somebody else is not enjoyable to you, if it's draining your soul, then there are other ways. And that's what the financial independent movement is designed to support, is to say, okay, this is not meant for you. Let's make sure that you're able to pursue your actual dreams.
right. No, I 100% agree because there are some people who absolutely enjoy being an employee. They love the security that it provides. They just love, you know what they love? They love the certainty that they're going to
Mm-hmm.
get up, they're going to go to that job, they're going to have to do X, Y, and Z, and then they go home. That's
Yes.
it.
Yes.
And some people function so much better in that arena, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's your path,
Absolutely.
right? So just know that we all have various paths. Just as long as we get to our goals, our tailored, specific goals, that's what it's all about. And so
Yeah,
I know that entrepreneurship is not for everyone, but you can still be a part of the fire movement and just do it in a different way. You don't have to,
absolutely.
yeah, you don't have to do it in me or TJ's way.
Yeah, and I want to call out for those people. It's called being work optional
Right,
when you are in the fire movement, but you enjoy working for somebody else.
right,
And what I like about that is that a company is still a machine that doesn't care about you as an individual. You might have a great manager right now, you might have an absolutely amazing team right now, but all of that can change in the blink of an eye. And suddenly you find yourself in a toxic situation like I did. And having what we call an FU fund for when that situation comes up is an absolutely amazing negotiating tool, because I was in this situation where I loved the company and what it stood for, but I had to go to my director and go, listen, I have the financial means to not be here. I want to be here. I want to make this work, but you got to know I'm not dependent on you. And that really helped me feel confident in going to them and saying, hey, you can fire me right now for complaining about this person, but I like it wasn't healthy for me. I was getting hives. I was like ready to kill myself. And
Wow.
I'm actually serious, guys, mental health wise.
Wow.
So like having that, even though I didn't necessarily think that I was going to end up where I am today in terms of running a business on my own, is such a big relief. And you never want to have to use an emergency fund, but it's amazing when you have it.
Right. No, I definitely agree. And the concept of an FU fund is not something that the Five Finance family has not heard from me before. So I read this book, and that's what the author said. He was like, you should have FU money. And it
Hmm.
basically means that you can tell your employer, F you, I'm out of here. So I absolutely love that concept. I actually built that fund for me when I was growing,
Yeah.
when I was making that transition. I mean, that's what I called it because there was a day, a specific day that I had in my mind that I said, you know what, on this day, guess what? I don't care. Deuces.
Yep.
And so I worked towards that goal and I built my own FU fund. And I even went on a trip right before I left. Yeah, it was like
Celebration. Your preemptive strike.
my freedom. I was like, oh, I'm free. So yeah, definitely love that you have that work option, right? That work optional approach to the fire movement as well, because I understand that not everybody has to follow that same path, and I love that you say it's okay to see some of the blueprints that other people have laid out and that worked for them, but your situation is unique to you, Five Finance family, so you have to do what is going to work for you. I say this all the time. I borrow a little bit from everybody because I follow so many people and I read so many books. Like I'll take a little bit from here, a little bit from there, and then I piece it together in this hodgepodge thing and it works for me. So you have to do that same thing. So thank you so much, TJ, for the awesome conversation. Tonight has been lovely. I hope that you enjoyed the experience too.
Absolutely.
So for the Five Finance family to connect with you, tell us how we can do that.
Yeah. So you can find me. My website is abundancefirst.com. That is the name of my method for the cash flow management for small businesses. And you can also find me on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at TJ Wey. And on Instagram, there's just a period in between TJ and WEY.
All right, so your Facebook page is here. Yes,
Yeah.
the lovely TJ. So definitely make sure that you are all connecting with TJ. Definitely loved the conversation that we had prior to us doing this live. I was like, oh yes, this is gonna be good. Z is speaking my language. This is going to be good. So definitely thank you for your time. I'm going to ask you to wait backstage, and I'm just going to say goodbye to the family, but I will connect with you in a minute.
Sounds good.
All right, Five Finance family. So thank you so much for another awesome talk. We truly, truly enjoyed having TJ on and walking us through some of those pivotal moments for entrepreneurs, right? Deciding, what we should invest in, where we should spend our money, how we can appropriately manage our money. I love that the whole concept about a budget not being an albatross around your neck, not being something that is restrictive, but freeing. So definitely hope that these tools, strategies that TJ shared with us tonight, you can implement and use them for yourself. So next week, we're going to have another guest on. Next week, we're going to be starting a new month. In the month of August, we're going to be focusing on legacy. So our guest Rocky is going to walk us through the profit first approach. And Angelica, I know you are in the comments, so you are very familiar with this profit first approach. So he's going to show us how to put our profits first. TJ kind of touched on it tonight. I was hoping she didn't get too much into it, and she didn't. So definitely, we're going to have Rocky on, and he is going to walk us through how we can put our profits first. If you enjoyed tonight's live and you want to stay connected with us, make sure that you are following us on YouTube. Make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can watch this in replay and other lives that we've done in the past. You can watch those in replay. Like and subscribe when you see a video that is intriguing to you. And then you also make sure that you are downloading our podcast. So we are on, I think, Amazon Music, Spotify, Audible, Apple Podcasts. So make sure that you are listening to our podcast on your way to work, or while you're at the office working. You can put in your earbuds and just listen to us giving you all these good tips and helpful strategies, right? And if you want to connect with me on a personal level, you can definitely visit www.5finance.com. You can go to the booking section. You can book a consultation with me. All of my consultations are 100% free. So you can book an accounting or a tax consultation with me. And yes, we are still processing tax returns. Okay, believe it or not. So again, Five Finance family, thank you so much for a wonderful Tuesday evening. It was truly a pleasure having our guest on, and thank you so much for your engagement as always. Until next time, you have a blessed and wonderful Tuesday, and we'll see you soon.